Hey, welcome to the Minnesota Progressive Repartee, our afternoon conversation, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, of course, here on AM 950, your progressive voice of Minnesota. Hey, if you're in the car, roll those windows down and turn the radio up. It's, just go back to those old days of being a kid making noise down the street, because it's so nice out. Brett, I know you and I are both stuck in virtual basements here, but if you were to get outside, it's it's the kind of day you think about in Minnesota all winter long, and it's really great. So in that sense, it's a Good Friday. In the religious sense, it's a Good Friday. Happy Good Friday, everyone. It's the day that starts Passover for the people who follow the Jewish tradition and faith. They start at sundown tonight, so a lot of things going on. But today on the Repartee, it's Mueller time, baby. It's Mueller Report. We're going to have Richard Painter on, of course. We'll be talking about this with him, and I can't stop talking about it. Last night, Brett, I posted a couple of things when I was reading the report and watching some news coverage and reading some things on the internet. You know, I didn't get to this till late in the day. I had some things going on yesterday that I couldn't quite get to this, and by the time I got to it, I started posting, multiple posts in a row, and someone who disagrees with me on impeaching Donald Trump, but I think generally cares about me, said, "Hey, man, I think you're losing your bearings here. You've go back and look at your posts," because I had done. I'd been screenshotting the Mueller report, so I'd get the page, and then I would copy the text, and then I would write a little editorial, and then I would paste the text, paste the picture. And I mean, it was over a couple of hours, right? It's like when a guy eats a whole bag of Oreos and says, "Well, it took me all afternoon. It's not like I ate them. It's not like I ate them all in one sitting." That was sort of how it went yesterday. But he was trying to say, "Hey, I think you've lost your bearings." I don't think I have. I honestly, I think that this is the kind of thing that I care about. Brett, I think it's the kind of thing you care about. We know when Richard joins us, it's certainly the kind of thing that he cares about, but not everybody does. I get it so much. I mean, I'm in I've long been in the occupation, business, and industries, trying to help people care about things that they might not otherwise know is important and significant, and they might not care about something as much as I do. So you sort of work on their behalf, right? And that's how our whole society goes. Everybody does that. So many things that happen in our life, in our society, we don't even pay much attention to. We don't know how the roads are made. We don't really notice when, the food just shows up in a grocery store. But of course, there's people working on all that stuff all the time. Somebody's waking up early, making sure the truck got out, making sure things were loaded, making sure the scans were taken. There's just a lot of people who think about things that make our lives operate and run. And politics, I've come to realize, a lot of people, I would even go so far as to say most people, they don't care about it. It doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean that without it, our society would struggle. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be calling one another and calling those who don't know or think much about it into times of focusing their attention. And this is one of those times. This is the kind of time when we need to, I think, as the politico class, right, as the group of people who are going to think a lot about politics and are going to think a lot about presidential politics, federal politics, and dare I say, the rule of law. You'd want to spend a little bit of time thinking about these things, and when you do, then I suggest that you share them. I know it can be draining to have your friends and family members be like eye rolling. It's Easter today, and having a bunch of friends over, a family over tonight, and seeing a bunch of friends tomorrow, and then a big Easter gathering. And I know people are already looking forward. When they see me, they're gonna be like, "Oh boy, here he goes. He's gonna start jabbering about it." And I'll be careful, right? There's a time, there's a place. I like to drop a little hint here and there, to get the conversation going, see if people are interested. But if you're one of those people, push this topic, because look, I've been saying this for months, and I'm going to say it again every day. I think until November 3rd, 2020, which is election day, or until it sees its fruition. The Congress needs to impeach Donald Trump. Now, whether or not the Senate, whether or not the Republicans in the Senate will have the good sense, will have the common decency to vote to remove him from office, that's a separate question. the Mueller report is at its base level a set of provable facts that are designed for impeachment. This is what they're designed for. This is how they should function. This is what we should be doing with them. People should be reading it under that microscope, under that lens, thinking about it in those ways. What Mueller said in his really well put together report. I don't know if you've all had a chance to look at it yet. It's not overly complicated. It's a little long. I mean, I got to say, the things Donald Trump did, there were so many things between the conspiracy and the collusion allegations about Donald Trump that it just takes a long time to get through that. There were so many contacts with Russians. There were so many incidents that they had to look into that Robert Mueller chose to explain. All of that going on, it takes a while to get through it, for sure, but it's not overly complicated. Mueller writes, in the report, this is the part that I thought was incredibly poignant. He writes that they did not, quote, draw ultimate conclusion about the president's conduct because of the inability to charge a sitting president. So what they said, and I've probably heard this in other news coverage, another commentator saying this, what they've said is, we as the prosecutors cannot formally bring a charge against the president, and therefore we're unwilling to say that we should charge the president, because if we say we should, but we can't, that then puts the president in a bad situation because the president can't defend himself. Because then there's an allegation and no system of response. Well, that wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be right. It's like immunity. I think that if people can think about how immunity works, if you're a diplomat from the United States and other countries, or a person, if you're a diplomat from Canada and you're in the United States, you have a thing that is an agreement between nations called diplomatic immunity. There are things that you get to do as a diplomat that the rest of people visiting from Canada don't get to do, that other American citizens don't get to do. If you break the law as a diplomat, you're not going to be charged. It doesn't mean that what you've done was not a violation of the law. What it means is you would not be charged for violating the law. The president, in essence, has immunity while he's the president. Robert Mueller spells this out clearly over and over and over in the report. And then says, because of that, we will, quote, not draw ultimate conclusions about the president's conduct, because the conclusion we would draw would be he's violated the law and needs to be charged, but that would be unfair to him. And then he goes on and says, at the same time, if we had confidence after thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. When people say that Donald Trump did not obstruct justice, and the Mueller report says that, he says exactly the opposite. What he says is, we cannot say that he didn't, and we cannot charge him. That's the stuck place that the Mueller team found itself. So in light of that, they laid out the 10 particular incidents that they think Donald Trump obstructed justice. And then there's this really important part. There's this little footnote. It's called footnote C. You're going to hear that phrase a lot. It's going to come up. Honestly, drill it into your brain and just keep it for conversation. Footnote C. It's the one where Robert Mueller says, hey, look, a president can be impeached and a president can be charged for crimes that the president committed while president after the president is done being the president. There's no way, no reason, no rationale for Robert Mueller to say those things in a written report that he knows the public is going to read and was going to be sent to the Attorney General if he didn't think that was a path that should be followed. He's laying out impeachment and prosecution after office. That's what's going on. So if a lot of people don't know this. Even that amount of conversation when their eyes would be rolling already, they'd be lost. They wouldn't care. It's just not interesting to them. It'd be the way I feel if somebody has sports radio on in the car. I just could not care any less about, the bickering over the offensive coordinator dilemma. Well, some people feel that way about politics. I don't. I think it really matters. And so I want to champion on behalf of others. And I know Julie thinks about these things a lot. Hey, Julie from Minneapolis, how are you thinking about this?
Hi. I kind of have a bad phone, but I wanted to jump in.
Please.
I kind of think that Mueller didn't do his duty because, well, first of all, you can have a sealed indictment against a president, and so you can't go after them until after they're out of office. And I don't think that's been presented to the public. I've heard many lawyers talk about that. And the other thing I want to jump in quick about, I can take my response off the air. I was very disappointed and disgusted by the head of the police union, Bob Coles, I think his name is. He was ranting and raving about the progressives and the communists and the socialists leading our city of Minneapolis. And it just sounds like he's got so much anger against the residents of the city of Minneapolis. With this latest thing that our mayor does not want the police taking quote-unquote warrior training. He sounds like he's been hired by Fox News instead of the Minneapolis residents, because he's going on and on about the communists and the progressives and the socialists. It's very disheartening. And so I just wanted to throw in those two things.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. Hey, I'll just make a comment. I didn't hear the comments that you're referring to of the police chief, so I won't comment on that. But I will say the part of the reason that Robert Mueller didn't do a sealed indictment against the president is that Mueller would have to have that indictment approved by Rod Rosenstein, and then ultimately by William Barr. And they believe you cannot indict a sitting president any which way. Not in a sealed indictment or in an unsealed indictment. That's why they didn't. And Robert Mueller says that's not the remedy for a president committing a crime. The remedy is remove them from office and then deal with them as a private citizen. That's why impeachment is necessary. Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats have to tell the Republicans to fulfill their responsibility and to do their duty. It is Doug Pagitt. We'll be back, I think, with Richard Painter here after the break on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, and your Minnesota Progressive Repartee. Brett, I was thinking about what we would do for music today here on the Minnesota Progressive Repartee. You and I, Doug Pagitt here, in with Brett. And I was thinking, I didn't have a chance to put this together, but what song soundtracks would you put together on the day after the Mueller report?
I'd use the music we use for Richard Painter, the Bad Boys song or the Chips Police song. Yeah, there's some options out there.
What was that? What was that old Semisonic song? I think from the 90s. Every beginning, every beginning is another beginning's end, or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. We could also do "I Fought the Law and the Law Won."
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Hopefully, the law wins, though.
Yeah, I heard somebody.
I'm not sure if the law is winning.
Here's the thing. Fundamentally, Donald Trump's commitment is to protect the Constitution and to protect the laws of the United States of America. He is called to be the chief law officer. In fact, Brett, could you look this up for me? Could you look up what the oath of office is that the president takes? Because George Conway, he's his wife spends a little time with Donald Trump working as a chief advisor. He has this great opinion piece out today, where he, as a Republican, as a conservative, and as an anti-Trump Republican and conservative, because remember, I mean, it's like there's a lot of reasons to be opposed to Republicans if you're a Democrat. There's a lot of reasons to be opposed to the ideas and the philosophies of conservatives if you're a progressive or a liberal or a lefty. All kinds of reasons. That's part of the fabric. That's part of the give and take. That's part of what makes us a general whole in this country. And there are lots of other opinions that make up the entire web. And that's all normal. Supporting Donald Trump is something else. Supporting Donald Trump is he cuts across. Look, he said it A lot of people have said it. Barack Obama was the same way. Bill Clinton was the same way. These people were they were cutting across the demographics, and people were connected to them for a whole set of reasons beyond just their typical left and right, conservative or Republican thing. So supporting Donald Trump and staying committed to him. When you hear about or read what are the direct actions of him in the Mueller report, it's hard to believe that someone could make the argument that based on what he has done, whether it was criminal or not, that it actually fulfilled his, as George Conway used the phrase in his editorial, his fiduciary responsibilities. Fiduciary responsibilities are these things that mean that you have an obligation to think about the ultimate good of that which you're caring for. Trustees have to do this. Financial advisors, sometimes they have a fiduciary responsibility, meaning they can't just sell you a stock because it makes them a lot of money. They're first and foremost have to be concerned about your well-being. Well, the president has a legal fiduciary responsibility to care for the laws of the country. He takes an oath about this. Brett, you have that text, do you?
I do have it, yes.
All right. Well, do your best this is what the oath of office sounds like voice, and read that for us.
I'm not going to do it in Trump's voice. I can't do a good Trump impression.
No,
but,
do it if you were the Supreme Court justice
yes.
And you were the one holding the holding the Bible for him.
So the president is supposed to say, the president-elect, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will be to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
To preserve, to protect, and to defend.
Yes.
That's what he's supposed to do. If anybody thinks that the President of the United States, as laid out in this report, showing what he's done, how he wanted his people in his administration to do what they could to violate the law, going on so far as to say, I will pardon you if you get in trouble. If you believe that he is not fundamentally acting in a lawless way, not an illegal way, but law-free way. If you could read the Mueller report, and I swear to you, just read the second half. It's the longer half. It's not cut evenly in half because the obstruction takes about 2/3 of the whole thing. But if you have time to look at and to see the behavior of the president that Robert Mueller said, look, this is the kind of thing that you describe as obstructing justice. The president of the United States not only has a very unique role in our society. On the one side, the president can't and maybe shouldn't be prosecuted for violating the law. That might be a good Department of Justice policy to not prosecute a sitting president. There might be reasons for that. That comes with the office. You're not going to be responsible for legal charges that are brought against you like every other citizen while you're in office because you have things to responsibilities to fulfill. But on the other side, you also carry with you the added weight to faithfully, to the best of your ability, and this should be Donald Trump's out. This probably is to the best of his ability, but to the best of your ability to seek and to protect and to defend the laws of the country and the Constitution of the United States. And if you believe that Donald Trump's actions, as they're laid out in this report, it's incredible. There's a line of thinking going around that goes like this. Well, fortunately, all the guardrails, all the strong moral people that are in the Trump administration protected Donald Trump from actually obstructing justice because they didn't follow his orders. He told people to do stuff, and over in the report, they say, he told Lewandowski to do this. He told Christie to do this. He told McGahn to do this. He told Jeff Sessions to do this. And they wouldn't do it, and they didn't do it. So he's a bad leader. People don't follow him. He tells them to do things they don't want to do. But those acts in and of themselves are what Robert Mueller says. This is violating your oath. This is violating the law. We can't prosecute you, but the remedy for this is impeachment or pursue you after you're out of office. He says it repeatedly. So what Donald Trump, what Mueller says is that the people working for Donald Trump who didn't take the actions that he ordered them to take, it didn't mean that Donald Trump didn't violate didn't obstruct justice. It means those people didn't obstruct justice. Part of the reason that they didn't, the people who were given these demands, orders, suggestions, requests from Donald Trump, is that they didn't want to go to jail because they would actually go to jail. They don't have the immunity that goes with the presidency. But what the president doesn't have with his immunity is immunity from fulfilling his responsibilities. And this is what I think we need to ask every single congressman, woman, every congressman. Will you call the president to task for not fulfilling his responsibility to protect the laws of this country? Because he ran a roughshod over him for 2 years, and he's going to keep doing it. And I believe Congress needs to impeach. It's Doug Pagitt on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, the Minnesota Progressive Repartee. We'll be back after the break.
Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.
Oh, nice call there, Brett. Every new beginning comes from other beginnings' end. And if the end of the Mueller investigation was the report, that's just a brand new beginning. Is that Supersonic? Who is that sings that song?
Semisonic. Yeah, closing time.
Supersonic. What is Supersonic?
Like
It's an old airplane model. Hey, Richard Painter. It's finally access to Mueller Report Day. So nice to have you aboard.
Well, absolutely. Great to talk on the show again here, but I'm telling you, we do not have the whole Mueller report. We've got a lot of it redacted, and behind those black lines, I am sure, is the stuff we really want to see, the stuff that is most damaging to Donald Trump and others in this administration. And I'm sure what they did is make sure that goes into the material that was shown to the grand jury, so it gets put behind the black line, and we don't get to see it. Then there's other material that was classified and for national security reasons. The problem there is that the whole classification system is controlled by the President of the United States. So they overclassify. We've had that problem going back to the Vietnam War when they classified the Pentagon Papers, which basically explained how they were losing the war and lying about it. So bottom line is you may very well have overclassification, and then second, a lot of material that they claim is grand jury material. It's all behind the double black lines that are very, that's what's behind that curtain. That's what we need to know.
Whose dog is this?
So Congress
my special friend
has,
Antonio.
Subpoenaed the entire Mueller report, and the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Mr. Representative Nadler, has issued that subpoena. That's the number one priority, that at least Congress gets to see the entire report. There are members of Congress who have security clearances, Democrats and Republicans who can see the classified information, and the grand jury information can be released to the members of Congress with the permission of the judge who's presiding over the grand jury. That is the number one priority, and that's what we need to push for. This is not over. The Mueller report has not been released to Congress. Congress has a right to see it, and the stuff that is critically important is behind those black lines.
Now, do you think, Richard, having looked at it, I don't know how much time you got to spend with it, do you think there's enough in the rest of the report to strike the level of I believe it's damaging enough that Congress has to act and remove the president from office through impeachment. I think what I've read there is just he is not able to fulfill his duty to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, based on the way that he's behaved and has been documented in this report. And I think it's a clear pathway for impeachment. Without the access to the redacted pieces, do you think there's enough there, or do you think the key to any kind of action to remove the president is really hidden under the black, red, yellow, and green redactions?
The information we have already in the public available part of the report, Section 2, on obstruction of justice, is more than enough to impeach Donald Trump for obstruction of justice. Robert Mueller was not willing to reach a conclusion about whether he should be criminally prosecuted for obstruction of justice, But a large part of that calculation was the fact that Robert Mueller's boss, Attorney General William Barr, has taken the position, the Justice Department has taken the position that the President of the United States cannot be charged for any crime while he is in office.
Yes.
And so the theory of this Justice Department is that Donald Trump could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, as he once boasted he could, and not be prosecuted.
He'd have to be removed from office and then prosecuted.
He'd have to be removed first. So Robert Mueller did not reach a conclusion about a criminal charge for obstruction of justice, but this is far more evidence of obstruction of justice in a very serious matter. Far, far more evidence that exists in the William Clinton matter in 1998 when they impeached President Clinton over lying under oath, lying under oath about a consensual affair with a White House intern. This is a very serious matter. It involves Russian interference in our election.
That's the part.
Yes, the impeachment of the president is called for.
That's the part that's so disturbing to me. Hey, so I pulled up a running tally on the redactions, and from this report that I saw, this news report, there were 900 instances of 900 separate redactions, and that covered 1,600 lines in the report. 427 of those are colored in black. So of the 900, nearly half of them are redactions that are related to what they call harm to an ongoing matter. And that was 1,100 of the 1,600 lines. So in the report, Mueller lays out a whole lot of things that are still ongoing matters, and those are color-coded in black. And then the next highest level is grand jury, which was 353. And then the last two are, there's 160 or so between investigative techniques and personal privacy, a fairly small number. But boy, I'll tell you, the stuff that the grand jury looked at that we can't yet see, and the biggest number of them, 427, having to do with ongoing matters, that also says to me, this is clearly not done because there's still ongoing matters. Do you think that the ongoing matters do you think in the term of Donald Trump's presidency, do you think those ongoing matters are going to be resolved in time for us to know what's in those as the general public, not only getting permission to have these released to Congress, which is the argument I think that you're making, that a lot of people in Congress are making. Do you think we will ever get to see those because there'll actually be cases that will be brought?
Well, there may very well be, and we do not know what's going to happen. We do need to remember there are a lot of career lawyers and prosecutors in the Southern District of New York and the District of Columbia who are not going to put up with shoving things under the rug. Mm-hmm. And I'm confident that Robert Mueller has made sure that a lot of career government lawyers, not political appointees or the U.S. attorneys, have seen some of that material, if not all of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Robert Mueller knew what he was doing. So this is going to come out. And the bottom line is that the longer this drags on, the worse for the Trump administration. I don't know how this is going to play out, but the most important thing is that we all support the U.S. House Judiciary Committee subpoena. They have a right to see the entire report. Mm-hmm. Anyone with a security clearance should be able to read the classified information. Everyone else ought to be able to read everything else. It all needs to go to Congress, and that is the number one priority. And then, of course, it will eventually we'll get it out to the public. But the idea that we should have this much by way of redactions and it's kept secret to the United States Congress is awful. And nobody should be acting as if somehow this is over, as if the Mueller report has been disclosed, because Attorney General Barr has supervised this process of redacting and Xing things out. And I am sure that a lot of the most damaging information for Donald Trump, for his family, for his campaign, is behind
too. Behind the black lines. Right.
You got it.
I hope it's behind those black lines, which are the ones that relate to ongoing matters. I mean, I don't wish harm, but I still don't understand why Robert Mueller never did personal interviews with Eric Trump, Don Jr., Ivanka Trump, or Jared Kushner. They're all over this report, and I don't understand why he didn't ever sit with interviews with them. I understand why he didn't sit with an interview with the president, and even says in that little footnote C, the reason I didn't sit with him was it would have tied this up in litigation, and I didn't need to. I have the goods on him right now. I mean, that's his whole point. I've got the goods on him already. Is what Robert Mueller. I mean, he doesn't say got the goods on him because he's not a radio show guy. But he said, I think our evidence is sufficient to make the point. I don't need him to sit under oath to say these things. We could prove it by the evidence that we have. Why Don Jr. and Eric Trump and Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner? That tells me this could just be partly wishful thinking. That tells me that their names are under those black lines of ongoing matters.
Those names could very well be under those black lines. We do not know. I believe that Robert Mueller knew exactly what he was doing. And I was just on the BBC last night when they put Sebastian Gorka up against me, and he was going on about how Robert Mueller was an awful, terrible guy. And I reminded him that Robert Mueller was a loyal American while Sebastian Gorka was at the White House wearing his father's Nazi medals. And then Gorka, of course, went ballistic. Robert Mueller...
I want to find that clip, Richard.
Yeah, important is that everyone stay focused on supporting Chairman Nadler of the Judiciary Committee and getting access to that entire report. Because one of the things that the Make America Great people and Gorka and the rest of them are hoping for is that everyone's going to start dumping on Mueller from right, left, and center, and that then his credibility will be destroyed, and then the whole report goes down. This is a very, very carefully done project, and by professional prosecutors, and they were not all Democrats, as I explained.
No, and it doesn't matter either. Look, I mean, the whole thing is, I don't care if somebody's a Democrat or a Republican. These people do their job. The idea that Donald Trump has polluted our entire judicial process by saying, what's your affiliation, or do you like me? Because that's what indicates how you're gonna, what you're gonna discover, what you're gonna rule, and how you're gonna follow the law. Donald Trump acts that way, but nobody else does, and I don't think we should get a stink all over us by saying that if someone's a Democrat that they're going to be against Trump, and if someone's a Republican they're going to be for him. These are people who should be, and I trust will, because if that's what we're into, is that what's your political affiliation as to who you're going to prosecute and who you're not, then we already live in a banana republic, right? So who cares?
Then who's going to take over? Who's going to take over?
Yeah,
we live that way.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what's happening right now. Is they're trying to undermine the credibility of Robert Mueller. They're trying to undermine the credibility of what we see in the report, and they're trying to say it's all over, and what's behind the black lines is irrelevant. Well, no, that's where a lot of the good stuff, or the bad stuff from their point of view, is likely to be. So it's very, very important that the United States House of Representatives see that entire report unredacted.
So here's what I think is going to happen, Richard. I think that some people in Congress are going to see what's behind those black lines. They're going to get access to it. And that's going to turn up their willingness to move forward with impeachment by basically saying to the American people, you know a lot and you know how bad this is. We know more, and we think we have to move forward with impeachment. I think that's what's going to bridge the gap between 60% of people in this country who think we should just move on and the need for Congress to have more support more public support in order to go forward with impeachment, is that Nadler and Pelosi and Schiff, they're going to come out and say, look, what we know is behind those black lines. That's also going to be part of impeachment. And how they're going to navigate that, I'm not sure, but I think that could be their pathway forward. Do you have any little speculation on that?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Now, I will emphasize that what we have already seen that's publicly disclosed on obstruction of justice is more than enough to justify impeachment of the president. It's probably more than we had on Nixon. It's far more than they had on Bill Clinton. With respect to obstruction of justice in a critically important investigation. Yep. So just on what we have, I think there's a case to proceed with impeachment. And I would caution the Democrats that if they do not proceed to articles of impeachment in the House. They can't go on the campaign trail and say, well, there were high crimes and misdemeanors.
I know.
Because it is their responsibility.
I'm with you.
Yeah, under the Constitution. And they can't just say this is political.
Right.
If they say it's political, they're saying it falls in that gray area, and that's where Clinton really should have been. Clinton was in the gray area where, well, he was in his second term, so voters didn't have a chance to decide. But, the point is that the Clinton thing was sleazy, but it was not impeachable. He lied about an affair, about adultery. But, I think that this is a lot more serious than the Clinton matter. I think it justifies impeachment. They should vote on impeachment. And it shouldn't be a left-right thing. It should be a matter of,
That's right.
What is the standard for the President of the United States? And obstructing an investigation of a foreign power is
it's unbelievable. Can you imagine any of these Republicans, if this was a Democrat president who was accused of this, like they would be sitting back saying no collusion? It's outrageous. Hey, that's Richard Painter. We're going to be back here after a break. AM 950, Progressive Voice in Minnesota, and this is Minnesota Progressive Repartee. That's awesome, Brett. That's great. It's making me all tense. I feel like I should be sitting on my couch with a bowl of cereal, ready to watch a crime be solved in an hour. Well, I'll tell you, a crime
that could happen.
Hey, Richard. I noticed when I was reading through the report, there's a little bit on page 170 and 171 that if someone's going to download the PDF and sort of flip to that section, it's a part where it's describing how the Trump team was interfering with the sanctions that the government of the United States was putting on Russia for interfering in the election. And they were actively in conversation. It details down to the minute who was speaking to the Russians and who was talking to people representing Putin and who was talking to the ambassador, and that they shouldn't have been doing any of this. And it even notes that Mike Flynn, who ends up having to plead guilty for lying to the FBI, what he was lying about was speaking to the Russian ambassador. And from the report, it reads, quote, Flynn told the office, the prosecutor office, that he did not document his discussions of sanctions because it could be perceived as getting in the way of the Obama administration's foreign policy. And earlier, a person named McFarlane, who was sort of the aide to Mike Flynn, said, this is quoted in the report, during the briefing, President-elect Trump asked McFarlane if the Russians did it, quote, meaning the intrusions intended to influence the presidential election. McFarlane said yes, and President-elect Trump expressed doubt that it was the Russians. That's from page 1253 and 54. So while many of us are rightly worried about the obstruction of justice, back to the issue at hand, which is that the Russians interfered in the election. Donald Trump didn't believe that they did or didn't want them to take credit for it, and then actively worked with Mike Flynn and McFarlane to promise the Russians that they wouldn't be sanctioned, that they would lift those sanctions. How is it possible that everyone's not pulling their hair out saying Donald Trump pulled back the very sanctions that the Obama administration, as the legal government of the United States, had put on Russia for interfering in our elections? I'm a little dismayed that all of us aren't screaming more about not only the fact that the Russians interfered, but that the Trump campaign was so in bed with them that they were using private phone calls to be chatting with them and saying, don't worry, we're going to make sure you don't pay any kind of a price for this.
Yes, this is the typical relationship you find between powerful politicians, including presidents, and campaign contributors. Of course, campaign contributors are supposed to be American nationals.
It's great.
It's this sort of dance around, the campaign contributors want this, they contribute that, and then you say, we'll give you this, and so long as there's no express quid pro quo, you don't have a bribe. And that's been going on for years, and thanks to the Citizens United case, a lot more than it used to be. But what we've got here is a foreign power that wants something, release of the sanctions and the ability to go into the Ukraine basically and do anything they want, in return for interfering with the election. And we know that there is a sort of an implicit quid pro quo here, but not enough to, of course, allow prosecution under the bribery statute, just as we have with the U.S. Campaign contributors. So that's going on. And we know what the deal was, is that the Russians wanted Trump in because Trump would then back off on the sanctions that were imposed with respect to Ukraine, and now, of course, the additional sanctions imposed because of the interference with the election.
It's unbelievable.
Like what's going on? That's the relationship. It's like the relationship, yes, that powerful politicians used to have with Wall Street or with oil companies. But at least Wall Street and oil companies are, predominantly Americans. Whereas now we've got the Russians on the other side of the equation.
Yeah, that's now, the thing that people. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the legal problem is there's something called the Logan Act that says that so long as President Obama was president, other people are not supposed to be negotiating with any foreign power about United States foreign policy. Now, the Logan Act has been rarely enforced, and there may be some constitutional questions about it, but the idea of the Logan Act is you got one president, one Secretary of State, and then you have a change of the guard, and then for example, President Obama would be violating the Logan Act right now. He called up the Russians, started negotiating with the Russians. We just don't do that. We got one president at a time.
Well, we didn't on December 31st of 2016. We didn't just have one, because Mike Flynn even says, I was in these conversations. This is what I was negotiating. I was making these promises on behalf of the incoming administration, and I did not
violating the Logan
and
Act.
I did
That's
not and he says I did not document those because I didn't want people to know we were doing it. Like, these people have been lawless. They've been lawless.
Yeah, he knew it was illegal under the Logan Act.
It's unbelievable.
We went through this with Nixon. Did some of this back in '68 when he was back in the North Vietnamese to say, "Hey, hold off on making a deal with LBJ until I win the election."
Sure. Yeah.
So we've had some of it before, but bottom line is that if Flynn knew what he was doing, he wasn't supposed to do. The Logan Act, there's some constitutional questions about it, but then the key is that Flynn lied about it. And once you lie about something, you commit an additional crime under 18 United States Code 1001, the false statement statute. Yeah. And that's what gets Flynn into the hot seat and with a criminal conviction, is lying about it. But we all know what's going on between the Trump team and the Russians. I mean, this was definitely a quid pro quo.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing. Like, look, I think governments interfere in other governments and other countries' elections all the time. Look, the United States does it. We interfere in people's elections. Like, we're messaging and we're dropping flyers and moving around. This is a thing people do. The thing that's different about the Trump administration is you've never had a presidential candidate that said yes to that kind of interference. Like, the protection we need in this country is not just to change our laws. It's that candidates need to follow the laws that exist when it comes to our campaigns. It's really unbelievable. Well, that's Richard Painter. I'm Doug Pagitt. We're going to get those black lines lifted, Richard, and we're going to see what's behind the veil. And when we do, we'll talk about it here on the Minnesota Progressive Repartee.